So we'll call this meeting to order. Thank you everybody for being here. Got a really awesome group. Been looking forward to this meeting. It's going to be a little bit different than our previous meetings because we do have some distinguished guests here this evening. So we're looking forward to having a question and answer session with our guests. We do have to do a couple of internal business things before we go into that session. So I'm going to give you a quick overview. So our board is going to, approve our agenda and then adopt the minutes, and then we'll flow into that conversation with the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. We have some questions we'll ask you guys. We've got some recommendations and input, and then we'll, after about 30 minutes, we can open that up to the public. And if folks want to ask the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, they're free to. And then after we get through that section, all the folks from the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, if you want to kind of go on about your evening and get back to your families, if you'll just turn your cameras off at that time, that would be great. If you want to continue to be a part of the meeting, but in the background and have more questions, you're welcome to, raise your hand on the Zoom and ask a question or write something in the chat. And so from there, we'll go sort of through our all of our internal meeting business. And then we'll have another comment section towards the end. And then after that, we'll adjourn. So to start the meeting out, does anybody have any recommended changes to the agenda for tonight's meeting?
I move that we approve the agenda.
I will second that.
So, okay, so agenda approved, unless we're absolutely required to vote on it. I'm just going to say the agenda is approved, and we'll move forward to the adoption of minutes from the prior meeting. I move to.
Well, I have a
first of
question
all,
about,
yep.
yeah. Chairman, if I could ask a question. I know that
Yes, ma'am.
by being vice chair, my colleague Stewart has to do the minutes. Is there any way
Okay.
that public comment, when people make public comment, that those comments could become a part of the minutes? I read in other commissions and council that specific comments are highlighted, when they're made. And I was just wondering if we could at some point add those either to this set of minutes or from September on out. That's my question.
I second that motion on I support, adding people's comments, particularly from here out.
I know it's kind of hard. I know it's kind of hard to do that. I was going to ask Brian, are our Zoom meetings archived on the city website?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so that if our secretary, who is Stewart, wants to go back and get them, he can access that archived Zoom.
Yep, it's available immediately after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd volunteer to help with that.
Bill, you're a great man.
Okay. Then I make a motion that we, unless there's any changes, we adopt the minutes from our July meeting.
Second.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as far as I'm concerned, minutes are approved, unless we need to do the Zoom vote on it and make it a bit more official. But that sounds good. So from here out, we'll make sure that we're recording the comments from the public in the minutes. And as Mr. Wheeler said, the Zoom videos are available, so we can go back and catch things. I know I've been watching a lot of them and learning and looking at some of the different things that we've been talking about over the weeks. So if there's no further discussion in regards to changes to the minutes, then we can move into our conversation with the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus members. I know their time is precious, so we'll move into that. I sent you guys a couple of questions prior to the meeting. Reason that we we reached out to you all because we know that there's a special session coming up in Richmond. And it's a monumental moment in time where you guys are looking at proposing legislation that could potentially establish CRBs. And right now we're a pretty big state, but yet we've only got three CRBs in the entire state. So that legislation will empower localities to create CRBs and then sort of avert the various challenges that they may face once they are established. I was told that Delegate Scott, oh, you know what? I meant to actually introduce our team. I'm going on and on and on. Let me backtrack a bit. I'm sorry, guys. Let me do introductions. We were talking, had a nice little flow in the beginning, and everybody hasn't been introduced. So let me just backtrack here. So my name is James Watson. I'm the chair of the Civilian Review Board. We're a pretty new board. We've this particular edition of the board has been operating since late June. So this is only our third meeting. The original board started in about 2018, and then there was about a 1-year hiatus between when they began their term, developed bylaws and an ordinance, and when they ended. So we're just getting started. So what we'll do, we'll just go around quickly on the board side, and if board members can, starting with Nancy, say their name and how long you've been living in Charlottesville.
Nancy Carpenter. I've been here since 2008.
And if Ms. Johnson can go next.
Dorinda Johnson, all my life, 61 years.
I really don't think she's that old.
Bless your heart.
Oh yeah. Philip, can you go next?
Yes, Philip C., 25 years.
You and I have been here the same amount of time. Stuart Evans.
I've been here about 2 years.
And I've
Last
been
but
here,
not least.
last
sorry,
but
Bill.
not least, I've been here about 3 years, 3.5.
Okay, so we got a pretty good mixture. And then we also have our city manager as well as our mayor are present. Mayor Walker, could you introduce yourself?
Nakia Walker. I've been here all my life and been on council since 2018. And thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules to join the board and answer their questions and public questions. Appreciate your efforts.
Hello, Teron Richardson, City Manager. I've been here about 15 months.
He's got
Thank you for joining
everything
us.
figured out. Got the whole city figured out. Okay, so why don't we go over to Senator McClellan.
I would usually defer to our chair. Can we start with him? Just out of
Okay, Delegate Bagby.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Senator. And she's going to be speaking a lot this evening because she's been doing most of the work on this particular issue. So I would imagine she's saving up. But I want to thank you all for allowing us to join you all. You have seen the agenda that we put out over a month ago, and we are looking forward to Tuesday when we really start to defend our legislative agenda in the House and the Senate. We feel really good about it with our conversations in the General Assembly, and feel good about it as it relates to our conversations with the governor. One of the things that we also want to point out is that we have been really focused on listening to the community and trying to figure out exactly what it is that we can do in the General Assembly to make this this legislative agenda move forward and actually help people. We don't want to just pass laws for the sake of passing laws, but we want to, and we don't want to just say we're doing something for the sake of doing it. This legislation is actually saving this legislation that we're moving forward is actually saving lives. As you all have seen with our legislative agenda in the past, most of this has been included. I'm sure Delegate Scott will figure out a way to incorporate the piece of legislation that he's been fighting for aggressively. That piece of legislation he's been fighting for since he's been here with us. Senator McClellan will talk about some things that outside of just the civilian review board that she's been working on. The fight continues, but of course, as you know, it just didn't start. We hope that we will be able to get a lot of this accomplished. In the last session, in the 2020 session, we were able to get a lot of things accomplished, but as we walked out of the Capitol in March, we knew there was one thing on the plate that we weren't able to address, that we were committed to addressing as a caucus, and that was justice reform. And we don't, I had to catch myself because I oftentimes say criminal justice reform, but as Delegate Scott always reminds me, a lot of times we're not dealing with criminals. A lot of times we're dealing with individuals that are being put through the judicial system that aren't criminals. And so we need to make sure that we're focused on the full picture of equity and justice. And so thank you, Senator, for letting me say a couple words before you speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am Senator Jennifer McClellan. I'm Vice Chair of the Legislative Black Caucus. I represent the 9th District, which is Charles City County and parts of Henrico, Richmond, and Ashland and Hanover. And I also chair, many of you have seen me in Charlottesville do work with the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission. And then I spent 3 years in Charlottesville while I was at law school at the university. So pleasure to be here with you all tonight. We are going to be putting on both the House and the Senate side bills to give localities the authority to have civilian review boards that have much more teeth than what you have now. And so looking forward to talking about that. I think overall you will see, not just for special session, because we know this is not going to be a one and done thing. It's gonna be a process that takes some time. But to the chairman's point, we're looking to begin the process of decriminalizing poverty, making sure that we are addressing the underlying causes of interactions with law enforcement. That we are giving prosecutors the ability to be and judges to be more merciful, and that punishments, when crimes are committed, that the punishments are proportionate to the crime. That we are making it so that access to justice does not depend on how good of a lawyer you have or can afford. And then if you are if you are sentenced, that the Department of Corrections process focuses on rehabilitation and reentry. So we know it took us 400 years to get where we are. We are going to start the process and do what needs to be done right now in special session in 2021. But we do know that this is going to take a lot of persistence, and we, the members of the Legislative Black Caucus, have been putting bills in on these issues since before the three of us were even elected. Going back to the first members of the Legislative Black Caucus, we've been fighting on these issues, and we will continue to fight on these issues so that our successors and our children don't have to continue fighting on these issues.
Right, that is excellent. I think I could listen to you talk all night. Delegate Scott.
Good evening. Like Senator McClellan and Delegate Bagby, Chairman Bagby, I also share a passion for these issues related to making sure that we have police accountability, law enforcement that's responsive to our communities, who cares about our concerns and are invested in our communities. That's why I think it's important that we have these civilian review boards, because we need people who know that we're going to have high expectations for those who we entrust to protect and serve our communities. And that is the whole nature of this argument that we move forward, that's related to criminal justice, punishment, because I call it the criminal punishment system, really, because the punishment system is truly criminal. Of what they have done, as Senator McClellan has said, poverty has been criminalized. Sometimes, and I'm gonna be bold about this, saying this, a lot of people say, well, Dunn, why is it always about race? Well, you know, in 1619, they invented the whole racial nomenclature that we use to this day. And so we're just trying to dismantle that nomenclature, and it's going to take a while to do that. And we do that as we continue to take the torch that we've been passed to try to institute true justice. And, you know, I'm going to tell y'all real quick, I'm going to tell you, Darryl, and Delegate Bagby is right. I cannot talk about police accountability and the impact that policing has played in the Black community. I want y'all to think about this for a moment. It's kind of like the Time to Kill, that movie. Close your eyes and imagine Virginia is 81% Black and 19% white. But 55% plus of the people who were in prison were white. That is what we live in now. We live in a state where 19% of the population is Black and 55% plus is Black in the Department of Corrections. And so I continue to say, either you believe in the white supremacist notion that all Black people are inherently evil, and eventually we're going to end up in the criminal justice system, or that you believe that this system is inherently racist. And I believe the latter. I'm going to continue. The data bears that out in every category that you can examine. And so I can't talk about police accountability without talking about justice reform for those people who have been thrown in those dungeons, in those cages, and left for dead with no path forward. So I'm going to always be advocating for us to give them the opportunity to earn their way out of that system and come back to their families and have a meaningful life if they can. Taking into account, not discounting any victims. I think restorative justice takes into the account that there were victims, that needs to be amends made, but then we need to figure out a way to heal everyone. And part of that is the conversation we're having. In regard to civilian review boards, I'm gonna end real quick, but I was in court today, because I'm in court. I practice a lot of criminal law, and I got the opportunity today in my city to speak to some law enforcement officers. And just having that conversation, number one, a lot of law enforcement, they feel like they're under siege. And I know it feels like you're under siege when you're finally held accountable to do the right thing, and you haven't had any checks and balances. So I'm asking your board and your panel not to be apologists for being strong on making sure that you have people that police your community that's accountable to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Adele McClure. You'd
Yeah,
like to go to? I knew you. One of your jobs is kind of to keep all these different folks around the state organized, but I know you have a lot, to say as well. So if you can introduce yourself and anything you'd like to add would be excellent.
yeah, absolutely. My name is Adele McClure, and I serve as the executive director for the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, and I appreciate you inviting us to join you tonight. In following the discussion, if there's anything that, any feedback or any input or any additional questions that you have, please feel free to direct it my way, and I can disseminate that to our members as well.
Okay, great. So Senator McClellan, they've said that you're going to be, or you've been sort of a key player in what's going to be, or what's being drafted that may establish civilian review boards and some of the other, forms of police reform. What are some of the things you are working on to have passed in Richmond in the special session?
Of
Well, thank you. So on the Senate side, shortly after George Floyd's murder, our chair, Senator Mamie Locke, put together a subcommittee of members from the Judiciary and the Rehab and Social Services committees, and I was on that. I am on that subcommittee, and I was designated the point person for bills dealing with local authority. Will not be carrying all of the bills, but have had a role in helping stakeholder them and collect information and get them drafted. So specifically, we will have a bill carried by Senator Ghazala Hashmi. I believe Delegate Scott is carrying the bill in the House to give to give localities the authority to have civilian review boards with independent, broad investigatory power, subpoena power, that your recommendations would be binding, that there would be an appeals process because we need to make sure that there is due process. But those are the broad outlines. I have not seen the final draft yet, but that is what we are working on, is so that you can, when there is police misconduct, in a transparent way, and in a real way, investigate and provide accountability. Because what we heard, we did a series of town halls across the state, and what we heard time and time again is there's a growing loss of faith in many communities in the ability to hold police accountable if they do anything wrong. We're also going to have a bill that will establish what we're calling the Marcus Alert System, after Marcus David Peters, who was killed in Richmond when he was in the middle of a mental health crisis, and law enforcement arrived on the scene, and that ended in his death. And too often that's what happens. Someone is in either a mental health crisis, in the middle of a crisis brought on through drug addiction, or someone with an intellectual or developmental disability who something happens and police are the first ones on the scene, when what you really need is a mental health professional to be on the scene. And so this would create a system where if someone calls 911 for what is really someone is in a mental health crisis, or one of those issues, that a mental health professional would be sent. You would have law enforcement as backup to secure the scene, but you would have the mental health professional working to secure the individual and deal with the crisis. So those are the local authority bills we have. We have a broad police reform bill that Senator Mamie Locke will carry, that includes things such as banning no-knock warrants, banning chokeholds, and some other things. We have a bill to we're working to try to give prosecutors more authority by getting rid of some of the mandatory minimums. And those are the broad, I'm probably forgetting something, but those are the broad issues. We'll have a press conference tomorrow, I believe at 10 a.m. that will roll out our criminal justice reform package. That's not all we're doing. I mean, the session will also deal with the budget and some issues around COVID, dealing with evictions and the eviction moratorium and the utility disconnection moratorium when they end, making sure we have sort of a glide path in place so that people who haven't paid their utility bills for 5 months don't have this big giant balloon payment due as soon as the moratorium ends. So those are a few of the things that we are working on, that we have bills on the Senate side.
You guys are working on some incredible stuff.
Yes.
Does anybody from the board have any questions at the moment to ask the members of the Black Caucus?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, the history here has been that, and certainly people in the city government can correct me if I've got it wrong. Basically, when the attempt was made to adopt bylaws and a enabling statute that called for a truly independent CRB with input into the ability to investigate and input into police discipline, they were immediately threatened with a lawsuit. And it's basically a Dillon rule kind of thing. So I guess the question is this something that we're going to be, that's going to help the existing legislation that's coming now?
Yeah, so just for those that are watching, we are a Dillon rule state, which means that local governments only have the powers expressly given to them by the General Assembly, either through charters or through general laws. And so I think that the threat of a lawsuit was there was not a authorizing statute that said, here are the powers that a civilian review board could have. This bill is going to be that. This bill is going to say localities may establish these civilian review boards, and here are the powers that those review boards can have. And so that is exactly why we're putting this bill in, is to remove any doubt that localities are authorized to have civilian review boards that have teeth.
I want to add another important aspect of this is this bill also will repeal the law enforcement procedural guarantee. Can y'all hear me? I hear her knocking. Oh, okay, you're knocking. The law enforcement
Yes.
The Guarantee Act will end. So that will be repealed, and that has been a stumbling block for any disciplinary actions to be taken by CRBs. So in the code is a Officers Procedural Guarantee Act that basically said if an officer was disciplined and they could go through the grievance process whereby they could select from a three-person panel, they could select one. The agency would select the other, and the two that they were selected together would select the third member of that panel, and then that panel would make a decision on what would happen or not, which is why you have such a low number of officers that have been decertified, which is why what officers would do prior to anything happening, when they would be decertified, they would quit and relocate to another agency without having faced any disciplinary action. So this bill also allows for sharing of information related to officers moving around like that, disciplinary. And so there'll be a lot more transparency in making sure that we have people who have the right temperament to do this job, because we know it's a tough job. It's a job that's needed, but we need the right people with the right training, with the right temperament to do the job.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Delegate Scott, I was watching a forum that you were on a couple weeks ago, and you were talking about ending qualified immunity, which is kind of a big legal word. Can you talk about, just let the audience know what that is and what, kind of what the plans are there, what impact that'll have on policing?
I don't have a problem if many other colleagues want to talk about it. Jay Jones, Delegate Jay Jones, who's running for Attorney General, as well as Delegate Jeff Bourne, have decided to carry that legislation. Qualified immunity right now is a legal fiction that the Supreme Court created in response to, and I want y'all to understand this came back from like 1869 Anti-Ku Klux Klan Act, which basically said we're going to empower people, a 1983 action, to sue government officials that abuse their authority and cause harm. And what the Supreme Court has done over time is created this qualified immunity, which says that if you're in the course and conduct of your job, and if this particular act is not clearly illegal, which means it can't be that it's on the books, murder is wrong. It has to be, they murdered you with this pen. If that's it has to be the exact same thing that person clearly knew was wrong, is the only way you can survive qualified immunity. So what happens is, if they didn't know clearly the conduct was illegal, then they end up getting kicked out. A lot of cases get kicked out. There's a Court of Appeals case that just came out where a judge had to throw a case out because the law demanded that he did, and he wrote a scathing opinion on why qualified immunity needs to go. And so what qualified immunity has done is protected a lot of bad law enforcement from prosecution, and from, more importantly, from paying money. Because we know this is America. When things change, when it costs money. So if we want it to change, we have to make it hurt. So if Charlottesville city police, city manager, y'all hire some officer who you know had hurt someone before and had done something that he should not have done at another agency. You didn't do your due diligence, and then he came to Charlottesville and did the same thing or something similar. Now, not only will he be able to be sued, but Charlottesville will be able to be sued. And that's when you start getting accountability across the board. And that's why civilian review panels are bigger than just civilian review boards are so much more important than just dealing with officers, but it has to do with hiring practices. It has to do with making sure that you get folks who are, you know, that was a front page story here where I live, where the city of Norfolk, of the only 25% of the officers actually live in the city. And I'm sure it's probably worse here where I am in Portsmouth, where we have the people that are policing us who don't live with us, don't go to church with us, don't go to baseball games with us, don't go to the grocery store with us. And so they only come in to police and then go back out. So civilian review boards hopefully can review those hiring practices along with some of the more scintillating front page stories that we get around police misconduct.
Right. You know, one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking is, you know, one of the things I'm wondering, is there a mechanism to guarantee funding for civilian review boards? Because, you know, localities may in fact begin to create civilian review boards, but you have to have some full-time staff. You know, I don't think that they can all be successful depending on how large the area the police force is covering, if they just have volunteers. Now, I will say Charlottesville does have staff included in their civilian review board package, but if there's anything, I mean, at this point, we're just trying to get them established, right, in the state. But funding is key, just like anything else, right? Because volunteers only have so much time. So, you know, they kind of run the risk of not being as successful without having people sort of maintaining them and looking at best practices. So, anybody else have any questions? Mayor Walker, anything? Nancy?
I would. I've been recently reading some information. I think it's called the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, and they're talking about use of force definitions and talking about use of force between necessary versus reasonable. And reasonable puts the burden on the defendant to determine whether something is reasonable, whereas necessary puts the burden on a plaintiff, which would in this case be the law enforcement. Have been any conversation about looking at use of force as a way to also mitigate some of this impact that people have been feeling for 400 years?
Yeah, so the police reform, the omnibus police reform bill that Senator Locke will be carrying will address some of that. It will require police departments to create a use of force continuum. So it's sort of a, you know, don't go to the absolute use of force first. It's like, here's sort of the gradations and here's how that's defined. And the Department of Criminal Justice Services will kind of work to help define that. Some of the other things, just to piggyback on a couple of things that Delegate Scott said, that bill will also prohibit the hiring of officers who were either fired or resigned during a use of force investigation. It would prohibit no not warrants. It would ban sex with individuals arrested by law enforcement. It would create a decertification procedure for law enforcement officers who are found to have you know, either violated the law or inappropriately used force, ban chokeholds and strangleholds, require attempts at de-escalation prior to the use of force, require warnings before shots are fired, require law enforcement to exhaust all other means prior to a shooting, create a duty to intervene by fellow law enforcement officers, prohibit shooting at a moving motor vehicle that's driving away, require comprehensive reporting by all law enforcement agencies, including the use of force data, and then would cancel HB 599 funding, which is supplemental funding for local police departments after local police have disproportionate use of force incidents filed in their jurisdiction and they don't take action. If you just have, a locality that's just all use of force and no accountability. So those are all included in that comprehensive police reform bill.
Thank you, Senator McClellan. Thank you.
Are you all looking into requiring police force, various localities to have body cams? I know there's a funding element that goes with that because body cams are not cheap, but it just seems like every officer should have a body cam.
Gotta turn it on.
Yeah, well, they got to do that too, right? That's got to happen.
I know we've had discussion. Don, do you remember if there'll be a bill introduced on that for special?
I'm not sure that there's a bill related to guarantee body cam. Delegate Bagby, are you aware?
So I don't think you should expect to see any legislation related to body cams. What you could possibly see, and I don't want to get ahead of the administration or appropriation in finance in the Senate, but what you could expect to see is additional funding for state police, and I think you should also expect to see in a future budget, a very near future budget, funding to support localities and to mandate localities move forward with body cams. But in the midst of our challenges with the budget, and in the midst of us trying to help individuals with housing and other things associated with COVID, and trying to move forward with the other criminal justice measures, I think we're in a sort of a budget crunch, as you know, and so you should expect to see something associated with state police stuff.
All right, thank you. Do you guys from the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus have any questions for us?
I think you all, I mean, I remember Delegate Scott and Senator McClellan, but you all shared a great deal with us, and you all sent us some information earlier on. And, one of the things and one of the reasons why we're trying so aggressively to move forward with this, and we know not every locality is going to move forward with this. That's why you all allowed me to take a moment to thank your board and your mayor for moving forward with it, and those individuals in your community that push for it. We just need more boards putting this together so that we can actually know where the gaps are. And that's why I'm talking to you all and seeing the communications that you all have sent us and some of the curves that you all have had to go around has been helpful. It's my hope that we will get more before we go into the 2021 session, and then probably the 2022 session is when we'll have a better idea of what resources we need to put in place and how we can move aggressively forward, just like body cams, to put some resources behind the support of these boards. And so I just appreciate you all sending the information beforehand and sharing some things on the Zoom.
Yeah, and as you guys are moving forward with the special session and beyond, just know that we're here in solidarity to support you. You can always reach back. And there's been some people that have been very good to us because we are a new board. So there's some folks from the prior year that were on the original board that did a lot of research, that have become experts, that I think some of you, they may be actually working with you guys in some, to draft some of this legislation. But so we've got our board, we've got, like I said, the initial members, and then there's some other nonprofit organizations in Charlottesville. And just know that we have your back. So never be afraid to call, write, email, whatever. And I really love this idea of working together across the state, because we basically got the 757, represented. We got 703 right there with Adele. We got 804. So, we need to work together, right? If we only got 3 and we got a big state, then we're still reimagining where we need to be, right? So just because we're here, the fight is not over. And
that's also
yes,
my
sir.
hope. That's also my hope with the civilian review boards, because it's important for us to have at least a couple in each area. It's my hope. Well, I know Richmond is going to move forward with it. It's my hope that Henrico is going to move forward with it, and it'll be great if a couple in Virginia, in Hampton Roads move forward, and a couple in Northern Virginia move forward. And that way you all can also collaborate and talk about some things that may go across the jurisdictions or municipalities.
Yeah, and I would emphasize, feel free to reach out to us either through Adele or to all of us individually. I mean, we are the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, and while we only have 22 members who are in 22 specific districts, we represent the whole state. And particularly when you see the Civilian Review Board bill, if you have comments on the language itself, please feel free to reach out to us or as soon as you want to, and this will be a continuing dialogue.
And if I could just, one thing that I think would be helpful, and is that if these CRBs were not under the city or county governments, so if there could be legislation that they could be truly independent under nonprofits, other organizations, I think that would help a lot. And maybe there are mandates for state and local funding. I believe that would ensure the accountability, transparency that we're really seeking. It's as much as we try, it's still hard when you're hiring people who are your staff members. And I'm just looking at this long term. And I know some other governments may not be struggle here with our citizens trusting us, and we've been following you all closely and hoping that we get to this point we're at today and hoping for a lot of success. But long term, you don't know who will be in office. There will be other localities who might not consider this, and nonprofit agencies being able to consider starting a CRB and maybe mandating funding from localities. If there are groups do that, I think would be very helpful in the future. Just something to possibly consider.
Thank you for that feedback.
Before we let you guys go, I do want to open questions and input up to the public. So if you have a little bit more time, and just for our folks in the public who are listening, there'll be another public comment section of this overall meeting, but during this window, you're free to ask the members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus questions. Brian, are there people waiting to ask questions?
Mr. Watson, we do have 2 people with their hands up right now, and if you want to join them, you can click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. If you're on via telephone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And we've got at least 2 people ready. Would you like me to start with them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as Mr. Watson said, you'll each have 3 minutes, And we'll take up to 4 people, and you can speak to the information that's been discussed by the Legislative Black Caucus members. And first up is Sarah Burke. Sarah, you're on with the PCRB. You've got 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm hearing some connectivity issues. So if at any point you all don't hear me, just let me know and I can try to call back in. Thank you for everybody for being here, for our dedicated CRB members and to the members of the Legislative Black Caucus. It's really wonderful to have this opportunity. So I was one of the original CRB members. Delegate Scott, you and I were on the same panel last night, but we were passing ships in the night. So it's nice to actually see you. We really struggled, as Mr. Watson has said, with so many of the limitations in Virginia state law and creating something that actually is meaningful and that has the support of the public, specifically the people who experience the brunt of policing. And there are a couple of issues that I'm not sure how you all plan to address, but I just wanted to bring to your attention and see if you all have considered them and wanting to know sort of what your plan is. First, maybe a little easier to answer, which is how you expect the collective bargaining law that was passed and is due to be effective May 1st, 2021 to affect police, and whether the police officers will be able to collectively bargain and unionize, and how that will impact some of the legislation that you're planning to pass and sort of the power dynamic and roles there. And then the second question is surrounding the Freedom of Information Act. So in my professional capacity, I'm a capital mitigation specialist licensed as a private investigator in Charlottesville, but I work across the country. And I often need to get access to law enforcement records as part of my role. And in Virginia, there's, as you know, in the Freedom of Information Act, discretionary exemption for law enforcement disciplinary records. And so there is no public right of access to information regarding if and how law enforcement officers are disciplined for specific instances of misconduct. And that includes excessive use of force and use of deadly force, in fact. So it's hard for the public to know how to identify law enforcement officers who've engaged in such patterns of behavior. I'm curious to know how the CRB's abilities to be able to make public comment and even some binding recommendations on police discipline will be affected by the Freedom of Information Act and the fact that unless it's planning that specific discretionary exemption is planning on being struck, I'm concerned that the board would not be able to publicly discuss law enforcement discipline and wouldn't be able to publicly make those recommendations if the city or county attorney chooses to invoke that discretionary exemption to keep that information private. So that's kind of possibly a dense question as your first question. I apologize for that. But that's something that's been on my mind and was, as we were we called them the sticky wickets or the hurdles of
Hey, Sarah,
Virginia law.
you're over your 3. I hate to be that guy, but you're over your 3 minutes. So hopefully you guys got the gist of her question. So if anyone would like to answer, that would be great.
I can answer a couple of things she talked about. The first thing is on the union issue. I think I don't think this review board will affect disciplinary process. This takes the disciplinary process away from collective bargaining. So the problem with right now is unions in Virginia already have the power to circumvent this disciplinary process. The police unions, that's what they do. That's what they've done. So what this does, the CRB will put that disciplinary process back in the hands of the locals. And where there is no CRB, you still have those. There are local governments that have what they call, like enforcement, they call it the Human Services Commission, and they have a grievance process for law enforcement that is just like the Law Enforcement Procedure Guarantees Act. So when we do away with that, that will still be the law locally unless we adopt the CRB. So I think those two things are mutually exclusive: benefits, wages, healthcare. It's different than they may try to negotiate it, but the CRB would still take precedence. That's the state code. The second question that I was going to, you mentioned is FOIA, and the bill that the first draft that I've seen, it specifically says that the CRB can make public reports on the activities of the panel, including investigations, hearings, findings, recommendations, determinations, and oversight. And they can investigate the policies, practices, and procedures of law enforcement agencies. So one of those procedures and policies would be what the Freedom of Information Act requests are. So the CRB, if they get that type of, they can totally help rewrite their policies and procedures whereby they wouldn't be able to hide behind some of those issues with freedom of information. And I'm happy to listen to Senator McClellan. I'm sure she has some things she might want to add on that too.
I think just to echo that, the Senate draft that I've seen includes the same language. And it is also my understanding that there may be a couple of delegates working on bills specific to how FOIA impacts police disciplinary records. Again, have not seen those drafts, but have heard that they are in the works. Not sure if they are going to be specific to special session or regular session, but that issue has been flagged for us, and I think a number of people are coming at it from different angles. But specific to the enabling legislation, we knew up front if we were going to have transparency, then those records would need to be able to be made public, and we did request that in the draft.
All right, thank you. Brian, if we can go on to the next member of the public.
Mr. Watson, next up is Harold Foley. He'll be followed by Elizabeth Stark. And then we have one other spot open. If somebody wants to raise their hand, they can click that icon in the Zoom webinar. Harold, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
First of all, I want to thank CRB. I want to thank the city manager, the mayor, and the Virginia Black Caucus. This is really exciting to see. First of all, my name is Harold Foley. I am with Legal Aid Justice System. And I'm also a member of the People's Coalition. And the People's Coalition been in the last 2-3 years fighting to have a strong CRB. One of the things that I think y'all touched on was data. Data is very important to give back to the community. What is in the bill that you all are working on that has some strong data enforcement for police departments to share with folks? And I know it could be encompassed with the CRB, but what is the strong data bills that y'all have that's it's going to be exciting for the CRB? And thank you.
Thank you.
So I do not remember the details about the data collection other than that we give the CRB the authority to request certain data from law enforcement, and again to make their public record activities available in the Civilian Review Board bill. I think there is some data collection mechanisms in the police reform bill, but again, I have not seen that draft. I've only seen a summary of that draft. So again, between now and Tuesday is when these drafts will be filed, and you can see them on the Legislative Services website for the General Assembly, and we'll make sure that we have that site made available so that anybody can review them once the drafts are filed.
I would also add, last session, Delegate Luke Torium, Chair of Appropriations, introduced the bill last session that called for a great deal of data collection around arrest, use of force, by race, by locality, by outcome. So that data is probably being, those algorithms are probably being created right now for input. So we're going to get a lot of data to supplement some of the data that we already get about who's arrested, how often, and what the results are. Delegate Torium's Community Policing Act bill that he got passed last session is all about data collection. And so hopefully you'll be able to get some of that data this next year as we come forward. Because it just got passed, it just got signed into law July 1.
And in the near future, again, you should expect to see, I've been in the meetings with Chairman Torian and members of the administration and representatives from law enforcement from across the Commonwealth. And what we've been really trying to do is to make sure that we not only collect that data, but we collect that data in a form that it can be useful, and we can also feel confident in the accuracy, in which a police officer is not able to only report the data for the stops and the interactions in which he or she desires to. And so we want the data so for an example, and we learn just like you all are learning from other localities, we're learning from other states. Maryland is one that we work very closely with. Adele is working very closely with the Maryland Black Caucus. And one of the things that Maryland does a little bit better than Virginia is only maybe one or two things that they do better than Virginia. But they they utilize the cruisers a little bit differently when they have a traffic stop or when they have interaction. And there's a lot more technology used. And so what we really want to do is when we want to set up a system really quickly that where a police officer goes to his or her cruiser, inserts the driver's license in some sort of a machine, it actually prints out the summons. The other thing is we're working with the Supreme Court to update the summons to make sure that that includes the information that we want to make sure that is included, including race. And so that's been sort of a challenge, but that's one of the things that we're working on with the Supreme Court and the administration. But we want to make sure that that data collection is done in a fashion that we can feel confident about it, and it's easier to share, whether it's in a spreadsheet or it's on an individual police officer. We want to look at the division and the individual.
One of the things we didn't talk too much about is the subpoena power. And my understanding is the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus is planning to allow or allot for CRBs to have subpoena power, which is at least one mechanism to get some of the data that Harold was mentioning. I mean, that's probably more case specific than just saying, hey, let me get all your data about everybody you've stopped in the last 6 months. But could you guys talk a little bit about the subpoena power component of CRBs?
So again, not having seen the final draft, we asked that the draft include that subpoena power, and that specifically that the CRBs would be able to request, a wide variety of information from the police department. Again, once I have that final draft, I can send it to you all to take a look at and get your specific feedback on if it includes everything that you want. But we haven't gotten that final draft back yet.
Yeah, and as you know, that is included in our legislative agenda, and it speaks specifically to subpoena power.
Right, Mr. Wheeler, are there any more members of the public waiting to comment?
We do have one additional person with their hand up, and I'll point out to the PCRB, Ms. McClure has shared some information with all of you in the chat. I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of that after the meeting. She's also pointed out that her legislative colleagues have other obligations tonight, so this will probably be the last question they can hear.
Okay.
And this will be Elizabeth Stark. Elizabeth, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
All right, we can. You've got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
I promise I have a pretty quick question. I want to thank the members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus for being here. I also want to thank the members of the CRB, Mayor Walker and Dr. Richardson. I am so glad to see this bold legislation being pushed in the upcoming, both the special session, and I think we know that we will also be facing these issues in probably in January as well. So I appreciate your work. My question is about Charlottesville specifically. We know that the special session has a historically ambitious agenda. And so I'm wondering, what if this legislation doesn't succeed fully, and where that will leave Charlottesville's Civilian Review Board? Is it possible to implement provisions for existing review boards so that the folks on this CRB can continue their work and proceed without, being concerned about lawsuits or violating the Dillon rule? Many of the folks on this board, their terms are going to expire, and they have so much work to do here in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't want to, it's always dangerous when you try to make a promise, but I'm fairly confident, based on conversations that we have had in the Senate caucus and conversations that we've had on the House side, that there will be enabling legislation that passes. And that enabling legislation at a minimum will authorize, worst case scenario, you will have enabling legislation that authorizes what the three are already doing, but we're going to do more. So I think you will see something pass in the special session that gives you all what you need, or at a minimum preserves what you have. And if we can't get as much as we're trying to get in special session, we're going to come right back in January and push for more.
All right, thanks a lot. Very much appreciated. I'm glad you guys were very easy to reach out to and get a hold of, and I'm glad it worked. I had my jitters, but everybody's here. The sound flowed nicely. I wish you luck over the next several weeks. Again, we're here. We got your back. Anything you need, if we don't know it, we'll reach out and get the answer. I hope that you guys will come back to a future meeting. We could have a meeting in the fall, have a status update. I like to keep politics out of it, but good luck, Senator McClellan, on your run to be the first Black female governor in the state of Virginia. This was really magnificent, worked out well. And I'm just pricelessly thankful for your time. We're gonna move forward into sort of our internal meeting components. So we really just want this part of the meeting to be the actual board. And so if you all are able to, click the little button on your video camera, it's kind of like MTV Cribs, and they say you don't have to go home, but I'm sure you guys probably ready to eat dinner anyway. If you'd like to listen, feel free to listen if you're still on and have comments and we say something, because we're not all lawyers. If you got ideas, you're welcome to join in. But at this point, we're, like I said, we're going to transition into a internal board meeting. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Right.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, and then my thoughts, Dr. Richardson, is when we get down to the executive director position, we'll bring you back into action. So if you don't mind zipping out, man. Good looking guy in your suits all the time. You see, I had to step my game up to get to your level. But
You're looking good. You're looking good.
Hey, of course I got shorts on, but we got launched right in the middle of obviously a pandemic, which is not an excuse, but we really just haven't been able to ever, get in the same place physically. So.
All right, that's fine.
Yep.
Just let me know when you're ready for me to come back.
Roger that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Right. see here. All
Can
right, I
y'all
thought
hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
we hear
Okay.
you loud and clear.
Okay. I
You-
thought because I was having issues with my mic and I was, okay, I'm good. All righty.
and Bill doesn't have the auto tone issue that he had with all those electrical sounds the last time, so that's good. All right, so moving along in the agenda, we through emails, due to our lack of being able to be in the same place,
Mhm,
we brought up having a discussion of the status of the board.
mhm,
Where are we? How we feeling? Right?
mhm,
We're all human, right? And so, I think collectively we felt a lot of resistance, right, from our mere
mhm,
existence.
mhm,
The original board dealt with a lot of resistance, and
mhm,
sometimes I've even wondered as I was communicating with the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus to get them to be part of this, said to myself, we may not have even been launched had George Floyd not lost his life. Because, granted, there's been a global pandemic, but I think we got our positions in February, March. Now, I guess they were waiting for Philip, but it just seemed like we were in limbo, right, for several months before we got launched and began. And then George Floyd came, and all of a sudden I got an email, hey, you ready to start? So, and maybe that's a coincidence, I don't know, but I think there's been a lot of folks, just from people calling me up, haven't felt fired up and ready to go, about,
mhm.
there was the town hall meeting, was that a week ago? And, we were told we were not invited. And, then it was explained, well, that was about the budget. Well, part of the budget is paying for an executive director and an auditor. I mean, anything policing, we should be involved, right? Any
Mhm,
conversation.
mhm.
So, and I'm a glasses half full. I'm not a negative person, but I know that in the middle of a pandemic with all these different things being thrown at us and lack of time and everything else, that piece isn't very inspiring. I just want to hear you guys' thoughts about, where we are, where you are, what space are you in?
Well, I was quite disgruntled, I guess is a term. I just did not feel that we had the support of the mayor or city council. And I'm really thankful for the Virginia Black Caucus to be here today and stressing the importance and showing actually the importance of having the PCRB. And they did a wonderful job, and I'm extremely grateful that they came, because they showed and they said how important it is for this board to exist. But we also know that without the support of city council and of the mayor, this board cannot exist, because we won't be able to do the job that is expected of us from the community to be done. So where I am with it is, I want to know, and I want an honest answer. I want to know if city council and Mayor Walker truly support having this board. That's what I want, and I want a serious answer. I want a real answer. Because quite frankly, like I said, if we don't have the support that we need, then there's no point in this board existing, because we won't be able to get our jobs done. It's just that simple. And so I don't think we have to hem and haw over this. I don't want to go back and forth. I just want a straight and direct answer. Just tell me.
Are you asking for that answer now, or I think we should have a discussion throughout the group.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. Obviously, I mean, for a lot of reasons, right? Like I'm spending a lot of time, You know, we have a vacant full-time six-figure position that allots to this, right?
Right.
Executive director. That's vacant.
Exactly.
I'm working a full-time job. I got 3 kids
Exactly.
that aren't going to go back to school. So I'm not complaining. People hear complaints, but
But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I don't think any of us have the time just to be sitting on a board or saying that you are a member of a board and just be sitting and not really doing anything to make the difference that you signed on to make. So that's my thing. You know, I've had people calling me and talking to me and asking me, what exactly is the PCRB going to do? Do you do city council want you to even exist? So if the community is out there asking these questions, then evidently they can see that there may be a little bit of a, you know, lack of support here. So that's what I want to know. I just want to know, do we have the support that we will need in order to get our jobs done and to make this work?
I'd like to go next, since we've heard from some of the other male members of the board. Let's continue on with this conversation. I have been frustrated, and I think at the last town hall, I expressed those frustrations as to exactly why, point by point, I was frustrated. And I feel like my colleague, Ms. Johnson, that do we have the support of the board? I certainly looked at the last council election and based some of my voting on platforms that were made public and were run as platforms. And I've seen some changes. You know, we've used this boogeyman of lawsuits and whatnot to stymie what we're doing. I'm hopeful that the General Assembly, the delegates and the senators can marshal enough support and lobby enough support to pass things so that we can be a very strong CRB, which is what we need to be, because it'll address some of those concerns that Ms. Johnson has had queried to her and myself as well. If that's not the case, what is the support? Because I agree with Ms. Johnson that if we go back and work under the auspices of the November 2019 ordinance adoption, we can't do anything, whether we have a six-figure executive director or not. So, you know, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to do what I can do to help lobby for these bills that will be introduced next week, and hope that, you know, we can get the support legislatively through the state that, you know, we don't have right now locally.
Right.
And we all have a passion to want to make change. I've heard everybody say they want to make change. And, you know, we just went through an anniversary date for a lot of folks in this community that is still packed with trauma. And to see what we saw, to see what we've seen in the ensuing 36 months when it comes to police interaction with people, I think that, you know, we have a responsibility to do the best that we can do to incorporate some systemic changes. And I think that hopefully will happen, I hope, legislatively, which will, you know, make me continue to want to be a part of this board. Because like I said, we all are volunteers and we all have lots of things we could do with our time. So thank you for this opportunity to share, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy. You know, I would love to hear from the quiet gentleman down there. Well, he's down in the corner on my screen, Mr. Phillip. And, you know, we got to hear from you. I know you got a lot. You longtime Charlottesville resident, and I'm sure you got something you want to say.
Oh, I have a lot I want to say, but can everyone hear me? Okay, hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I want to echo what Nancy's saying on being patient and wait and see, but not for long. This is an idea whose time has come, but it needs additional approval from the General Assembly to move forward. This board cannot be seated until my position was filled. And even though I'm a non-voting member, some may think, well, you're a non-voting member, you have no opinion. And I'm going to share my opinion from time to time when it's proper and appropriate. I just don't want us to go down rabbit holes that they're out there, and what needs to be done. And I'm going to move on to my third point is the planning for how this movement throughout the Commonwealth is going to be opposed, watered down, and then we have to navigate the legal minefield that we know will be presented to this cause, civilian review boards. And I hope the language of the bill includes buy-in from law enforcement, because I haven't really seen, I've talked with several law enforcement on a handful, but they're the good guys and ladies, the ones that go by the book, do what they're supposed to do. It's the ones, it's like the idiot that sat on the guy's neck for 8 minutes and some seconds that just blow it up for everyone. But those folks are out there, and they've got to be removed from wearing a badge and carrying a gun. And then my final thing was, yes, once the board was seated, we kind of got a directive, just, hey, sit tight until the special session of the General Assembly. So it's not clear to me, and I've been through this binder numerous times, what we legally can pursue at this point. And no one has really made it clear, and I've asked the question. I'm gonna keep asking the question. So it seems like we're waiting for the General Assembly to clear the way to operate, and hopefully to operate properly. And then, I go back to that point that I made, that legal minefield that, yes, law enforcement and where we sit right now, there are no unions in the state, but there are organizations and units that, as you know, because we're in the Commonwealth, it's just like trying to remove a teacher that is ineffective, that is tenured. You have to go through a process. You have to go through a plan of improvement. You have to go through a lot of things. And with the law enforcement or city employees, any government employee that is not doing their job properly or has violated laws, there are steps and there's times and there's information that you can get a hold of and information you can't, and it hasn't been clear. So as we move forward, I'm going to try to remain patient and just watch, and hopefully we'll get some resolve here or some movement with this session, the special session, and then definitely by the session in the late winter and early spring. And I thank you guys for allowing me to ramble a bit.
That's great.
Well, if I may go next.
Yes, sir.
I guess I feel like the question that Ms. Johnson was asking, like whether or not the city council supports this, has already been answered. And it's pretty clear that they don't. Like, that's how I feel. I mean, this talk of patience makes me want to pull my hair out, which I have a lot of right now because I haven't gotten a haircut since February. But I mean, it's been 3 years since people pushed for the CRB. It took a while to get the initial proposal going. And then once that was presented in July of 2019, it took until November 2019 for something to be passed. So that's many extra months. And it's not in the form that that people worked so hard on. It's even less strong than before. Then it took until February 2020 for us to be appointed, and then it was radio silence. And well, we had a meeting scheduled for March before Mr. C was even appointed. So I question the very idea that that was what was holding things up. If that's what, I don't think that the city's actually said that per se, but so then radio silence. So I mean, just more delay seems kind of crazy to me. I just feel like I am really reluctant to continue to legitimize the CRB by participating in it when the city clearly doesn't support us. You know, they have come to our meetings and ended it abruptly or early, even though they're not technically on the board. They've bristled when we've questioned whether or not we should be truly independent. I mean, and insulted us really. The mayor's email at 3 a.m. Poked fun at us for asking questions that she thought were too simple. And she told us she didn't want to pay for a lawyer an independent lawyer to answer those questions. And all we're trying to do is to figure things out. I mean, I think what Philip was saying is that I've asked lots of questions, especially at the beginning, simply trying to figure out what we have to do because there's no pre-existing board. We have to get this up and running somehow. And none of us are experts in how the city government works. And at every time there's either pushback, confusion, but there's no support. I mean, there's also ultimately support when we're squeaky enough when on the wheel. And then, you know, I'll just note that there have been 2 city council meetings since we asked for them to voted and asked them to consider to re-implement the bylaws. That could have been those could be in effect right now. They just have to do 2 readings, if I'm correct on that. I'm not 100% sure. But so we could have those in effect right now if they truly did care. Instead, they told us to wait for an indefinite time period. I mean, that's more telling us to forget about it. And then they've told us, find an executive director, do this. So now they're just crossing this line again where they want to tell us what to do, but they won't do. I'm just puzzled by the relationship. You know, and we say that, I think a lot of us think that we can't hire an executive director until we know what bylaws we're operating under, you know, and we want the original ones, but they've told us to wait. And then at the last meeting, it's been 5 weeks since the last meeting, which is crazy. And I'll get there in a second, but they haven't produced those written responses to the questions that we asked last time. If they could explain why the changes were made from the initial bylaws to the current ones. You know, if they truly cared about us, wouldn't they have provided those to us? It's been 5 weeks. There's not that many changes there, but they are important changes, but there's not that many changes. Haven't seen those. On the subject of whether or not we can meet, you know, I think we all agree that more needs to be done in a perfect world because the world is far from perfect right now. The city tells us that they can only support us for 1 Zoom meeting a month. How are we supposed to get anything done? I feel like the current bylaws are toothless. The ones that we've asked for are slightly better. And I just don't know. The city seems to want to have it both ways. They want to have this veneer of independence and progressiveness by having us exist. But then they want to only do what they want to do. And I don't want to be just I don't want to be a volunteer member of the city bureaucracy, basically. And only do what they'll let us do and on the timeline that they want. You know, to me, I don't know what, I know that this is hard work. This is a brand new thing, but when they departed from the initial bylaws and then haven't really been very transparent about why, and then even when we've doubled down and said we want to know, we're still getting no answers. I just don't see that this is working. To me, the city council has to recommit to this board. And I don't think that I don't know how to send that message to them, but I don't really want to be a part of it right now. And I've strongly considered resigning. If 3 of us, I'm not encouraging other people to resign. I'm just pointing out that if 3 of us who are voting members resign, there is no quorum that's possible right now. So that we cannot meet as the CRB could not meet at this with only 3 voting members. I don't know if that's the message the city needs. I just know that I don't know. I don't want to keep doing sort of having these long conversations that apparently suck up city resources, and then just having them sort of pay superficial attention to us and superficial commitment. And I'm very close or considering resigning. I don't know what message needs to be sent, but it doesn't seem like it's working right now. And maybe they need to start from scratch again. I don't know, but I don't want that. What I'm really worried about is that having a board that exists that appears like it's effective, but is not legitimizing, oh, we have this independent board, they look after us, and when in fact we don't. And so I don't want to participate in that, is how I feel about all this. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart. Can I say something really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
I have to piggyback what Stuart said in regards to having a board where you're just sitting. You're so true. It's so true. Been there and done it. This is not my first rodeo. We did this with the Human Rights Commission. I was on the Human Rights Commission for 3 years. And like I said before at the other meeting, they keep bringing these boards and these commissions and not supporting them. And just making them for face value, just to say, hey, we got this board. Okay, we got the board. And we meet every month and we talk about the same thing and we listen to everybody saying the same thing and we do nothing because we can't. So when is this going to stop? We need to ask, when is this going to stop? I wanted to make a difference. I want to help. And I got on here because I was excited and anxious to help. But on the opposite side of that coin, in the back of my mind, something was telling me it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same as it was before. But I went on ahead and did it anyway, you know, and I'm truly hoping that it will change, and I'm trying to be patient. But at the end of the day, I'm a little older now, and my patience is not what it used to be. So, I don't know. I don't know.
I guess I guess it's my turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not a glass half full guy. I guess I'm more of a glass is not yet empty guy. And I would strongly urge members not to resign or withhold their involvement on the board. And I think we should, and I know it's frustrating. And I know, look, this is my first experience, so maybe you know better than I do. But we got to move forward ourselves. Getting the Black Caucus involved was a wonderful thing. We need to build alliances. We need to show strength. We can't rely on our semi-professional city council to get their act together and write a statement and risk a lawsuit on our behalf. We got to do it ourselves. If we wanted to meet, we could hold an emergency meeting, and I damn well sure that the city wouldn't refuse. We should understand that disagreement on a specific issue is not treachery, and it's not a lack of support. And again, we're working with a semi-professional bureaucracy, small city bureaucracy. Well, yeah, I know it could have gone a little faster, but let's keep on going. We have a procedure in place to receive complaints. That's our most important procedure. That's our most important function. We weren't invited to the listening session, but at least 3 of us spoke our piece, and several others were on listening. So, you know, that was silly of the city council, but not criminal. And so I don't think we should take it personally. You know, I think the most concrete thing that we can do right now at this meeting is to get our executive director board, you know, job description approved and send it to the Human Resources Department, because that's the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So, in summary, we're clearly frustrated, and we want to make a difference. That's the only reason any of us are here. And we don't feel supported, and we don't feel like I'm saying we, but I guess Bill's feelings were a little bit different. But we don't want to waste our time, right? We don't want to be puppets. We don't want to be, this fictional veneer, as Stuart called it. I mean, all the time that we're putting into this, we can be putting into other things in the community to make a difference. So I'm on the fence myself. I've never quit anything. I'm not a quitter. I never give up. But the amount of time we're putting into this, if it just goes in a circle and there's no tangible improvement, I'm saying to myself, wow, I could be donating my time to working with youth, right? Helping kids work their way to going to college, helping people of color buy homes, and gain wealth. I mean, all the time I've spent just in the last 6 weeks, I could have been doing some of those things. So I'm honestly and truly on the fence myself. I'm not a quitter, but if it's just caught up, in bureaucracy and waste of time is precious, right? Particularly now. So I'm not saying I'm jumping ship today. I mean, I do, like Dorinda, I want to stick with it, and I reached out to the Black Caucus, right? Like you put a wall in front of me, I'm gonna climb around it. I'm gonna dig a tunnel. I'm gonna build a bridge. I reached out to the Black Caucus. Some of those folks are in the network, so that I'm in, and it was easy to, they showed right up, and I thank them for that. But do we want to keep doing that kind of thing over and over and over? So that's what's kind of disappointing, that we want to do good, right? And some of the folks we elected, Michael Payne said, hey, he can't get the support. In that one meeting, said he can't get the support. Go back to the old bylaws, and as Stuart said, the old bylaws aren't even that, they're not even that strong when you really start researching things. So, if we want something even stronger, how are we going to get there? So, yeah, I think we need to keep moving through the meeting, but I wanted to have that discussion so that we all know where we are, so that the public knows where we are, because there has been rumor about, us jumping ship. And I think we've all considered it because we don't want to waste our time.
Yeah.
Waste my time. Just start a nonprofit and change some things easier than being stuck in this framework right now. So. Anyway, does anybody else have any more to add to that particular part of our discussion as far as us moving forward? Nothing more to add. Okay, the next item on the.
I was just going to say, I'd like to thank people for expressing themselves openly.
Thank you. You gave us some hope too.
Thank you.
Sure. Give us some hope.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for even, just even wanting to take the time,
right,
to be involved and wanting to make a difference. So I just like to say thank you, because at the end of the day, it's not about just us. It's about the people. It's about the community. And that was the reason why we signed on board, was to help people. So
can I just add one other thing, Dorinda? Don't make I think all of my professional career, I've worked for either a county, city, state, and or federal government. And it's not that I'm institutionalized, because I'm usually the guy that's, when everybody is lined up to jump off the bridge and it comes to me, I go, wait a minute, why are we jumping? And then, you become the boat rocker and this and that and so forth. We are at an interesting time right now, and if I can encourage you, I don't know your personal situations, and believe me, I've wrestled with this. James and I have talked, and thank you, James, for listening. That none of us, time is precious. It is so precious, and I'm not going to get into why I'm saying time is precious. I think those of us that have lived life a little bit or so forth, we know. Time is very precious, and especially if you have families and you have concerns and so forth. I have Miss Maggie, my German Shepherd, and she's precious. She's sitting there looking at me. But if I could just, and I don't know your situation, but if we can just hang in there just a little while longer, see what this special session yields, And if not, believe me, I understand. Gosh, what you're saying is just, I don't think folks understand sometimes when you turn to the community, you ask for the community to do things, you set them up. Sometimes, I'm not saying this is a situation right now, but you're set up to fail, or you're not given the resources that to do what you said. Bill did make a point. We have a procedure in place to receive complaints. That's a start. But as I said when I opened up, yes, I'll be patient, but not for long. So we have the special session and then the General Assembly. And I didn't want to get into it. I am going to talk with the Black Caucus, but what is the will of the General Assembly? How is this going to really go? We all, you guys remember from your history, and I studied this case quite in depth, Brown versus Board. They had to find a case to lose to get it to appeal, to get into the process. And then how many minefields did that legal team have to walk through before they finally got it to the Supreme Court? I'm not saying this is that extensive, but sometimes, yeah, we'll do that, but immediately roadblocks are put up. And we find them as we go down the road. And it's either we have to figure out a way to go around it, or do we come back and so forth. So again, I'm going to shut up, but I encourage you, if you can hang on a little while longer, great. If you can't, I wish you the best. And I really, it's unfortunate that we can't sit in the same room and look at each other, but thank you for your time. I know that I don't normally speak, but tonight I probably out-talked my welcome, but thank you for listening.
One thing to consider is if one of us quits, think how long it will take the city council to hire somebody else.
And I just want to say that I'm not here to like dog on city government or make anything personal. This is not, I've worked in state government. I'm technically a government employee now. That's not an issue. It's not personal. Like I'm talking about whether or not the institutions are set up to thrive. And my concern is that the current arrangement is that they're not. Maybe that will change with the General Assembly. I don't know. That seems to be pretty up in the air, but I just want to make that point. I just want to also suggest to Chair Watson that, while also simultaneously, I get the irony here, simultaneously complaining that we don't get enough time to meet, we can table some topics to discuss at in the later meeting. We don't have to get through everything, but I want that to be out there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the agenda in front of us, and there's just quite a few items still left. We'll get complaints from the public that we didn't go through everything, but the reality is this was one of the most important conversations we've ever had.
Right? I think that there's a flip side to that too, is that we're not really making ourselves available to quote unquote whoever the public is if we're talking at 9 o'clock at night on Zoom, right?
Right.
Like during one of the most impressive comments I recall during the town hall meeting last week was about how the people who really should be weighing in on matters like this are people who are stuck at minimum wage jobs for long hours because they don't have the luxury to participate in these things. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that how many people are watching. I've seen this participants count at the bottom steadily decline as the night gets later.
Right. Okay. Well, Bill had mentioned earlier something that I agree with about the executive director position. I mean, then there's the reality that we don't have the bylaws and ordinance. I have concern about that just not being filled, just going vacant for a long time, because at the end of the day, I mean, that ends up falling on, at the moment, me, right? And to some degree. And I think that if we don't have somebody for too long, we're kind of doing the community a disservice. Somebody's got to be there. There's Sunday phone calls that come or emails. People want to know. People are asking me, hey, there's somebody at the statue guarding the statue. That may not be in our wheelhouse based on the ordinance, right, and bylaws, but we do need a human in the seat that's working full time. And so yeah.
I was going to say, maybe I think this is in the spirit of what Stuart was suggesting, is that I might move to table items B, C, and D. And if we get to them later, we can reconsider. Item 6, B, C, and D, and move on directly to the executive director position.
I second that.
I can't vote, but I agree.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can we have some discussion on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't particularly want to, B and C, I think, are, to me, rank 1, 2, and the executive director's position ranks 3. Just because, if the General Assembly should, in this special session, adopt some really strong measures for CRBs, and consequently the executive director that will be working, with us, how do we go about writing a weak executive director position based on their current ordinance versus, are we going to come back in September or October and want to rewrite the executive director's position to reflect what may occur at the General Assembly? Should we, if we're going to table anything, shouldn't table the executive director's description until we know or have a good feeling, maybe by the September meeting, what has transpired, what will transpire in 2021.
I agree with
And
Nancy.
we have committees that we haven't even established yet, and I thought one of them was an outreach committee, which could perhaps take some of the load off you, James, for answering emails or things like that.
I agree with Nancy about the executive director thing, but we could still vote on it if people want to tonight and just see how the vote happens. I would point out that at least C, and I don't know about B if there would be a lot of discussion, but C is all we literally have to do is vote to authorize the hiring of just to get the wheels turning.
Yes. Okay. We should
That
do
should
that.
take-
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to table that.
Okay.
So Max, I think you're out there.
Well, should we do I move?
Okay, do the motion. Go ahead.
I move that we as a board authorize the city to assist us with hiring an independent counsel pursuant to any requirements set forth in the bylaws and the ordinance.
Second.
Ms. Carpenter,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart. I'm sorry, Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Mr. Watson.
Yes.
Well,
Okay. So then we can begin to pursue hiring counsel.
Yeah, I think at the last meeting, Mr. Blair or someone talked about that we could reach out to Max or what, just to get the wheels turning. And
Yeah.
obviously that's not going to happen overnight. I'm sure there's documents to be signed and like some sort of process to figure out who's eligible to be counsel.
I talked to Mr. Blair over the phone about hiring counsel, and one of the things that I recommended is that that the city try to hire a small woman or minority owned or LGBTQ owned law firm, if there's one that's qualified in Virginia. A couple years back, Dr. Bellamy had uncovered the fact that the city of Charlottesville hired less than 1% of minority vendors. And that's to do everything from grass cutting to IT services. So one of the things that Mr. Blair said that as they're building out the RFP that they would look into is putting that in there, that they would give preference to and that may not be the right word, he may jump up on there, but to a minority owned small women or female law firm. So, okay, so we knocked that one off. You guys have the A, B, and C, and I've got a printout, and I don't have the letters on there. That was item C?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So then A and B are, what's A?
Status
Status.
of the
Yeah.
Okay, we did that. Status of the board. All right. And what was B?
Obtaining documents.
Okay. Stuart, would you like to go into that?
Yeah, I could talk about it briefly and we can decide if we want to vote on it or not. But so without making any motion, on page 6 of the packet that was posted to the website, there are some document requests that, and information requests that I thought would start the board off in the right direction of understanding how the police department works and what documents the city has been relying on. There's six requests with some subparts. My understanding from talking to Mr. Wheeler at the beginning of all of this a long time ago was that if we voted as a majority, if there was a majority vote of the board asking for information like this, you know, it wouldn't be considered like an individual FOIA request, but it'd be us as the board asking. And I don't know if that would come out of our budget or whatever else, if we get charged by the city for its labor in producing this. But I just thought that we could start to ask for information, and then we could, at some point, assuming none of its whatever parts aren't confidential or anything like that, we could post it to our website so the city has access to it, so the citizens of the city has access to it, and then it also would hopefully help us understand like issues that pop up and things like that. So I sent that list to people via email before this, and then so it's also posted in the packet. So that's, we can have a vote on it and just ask if a majority of people are interested in this information. We can also table it till next week, but I don't have a lot more to talk about. I mean, I can talk about.
I would second voting, or supporting attaining that information.
Okay, well, yeah,
that's the information that makes me transparent.
Yeah, so I guess I'll consider what I said as a motion to like for us to submit these requests to the city and the CPD. And you seconded it?
I'm seconded it.
Or James did, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Does anyone else want to have any discussion before we have a vote?
Well, I just, I noticed that a lot of these items refer to specific incidents that occurred quite recently. We have a huge database of incidents that have occurred in the last year, which we haven't explored yet or gone over. And we could do so, and we could be a lot more comprehensive and much more, we could set our priorities much more in an informed way. You know, if someone is harassing somebody during Father's Day on the mall, that's important, but it may be that there are 25 arrests on the mall during the last year of certain individuals, you know, that may be much more important to us. I don't think I can support the motion in its current form, and I suggest we reconsider tabling it.
We have Stuart's motion first, and we'll see if that applies, and then
I understand.
Yeah,
cool.
And I just point out, and as part of the discussion, is that this is just like a few things that were on my mind or that I'd seen other people talk about. There's no prohibition on at every meeting or every quarter asking for info. It's simply about starting to collect it and make it accessible to people and help us understand like what is going on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's you know, it gives us a better understanding of how the police department's been doing business. And you can always ask for more later. Even if this is very specific, you can keep asking for it. So I don't see anything wrong with getting any information about incidents. Should be available.
Yes.
I call the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead. We're good. I'm good.
I'm calling the vote. Can we?
Hold on. I'm the chair. Okay, I'm a nice guy, as you all know, and I'm the chair. But let me just get this clear. Can you restate, just to make sure we know what we're voting on? I know it's access to records, but can you restate, even though I'm supposed to do that too, but can you restate that?
So on item, it's page 6 of the packet. So,
right.
You know, my motion was to move that those requests for information and documents be submitted to the city and/or CPD, whoever has the documents, on behalf of the board, and request responses to those requests, I guess. So.
Okay. So Max, we would like to vote on a request for the documents in the packet related to information about incidents within the Charlottesville PD.
So yeah,
So many words.
Like forward that list to the city and ask them to respond formally as on behalf of the board.
Okay. Ms. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Present.
and Mr. Watson.
Yes. Okay, so the vote stands.
So that leaves the website and the ED job description I left before general public comment.
Okay, my thought with the website really at this point, particularly given the time we're working with, if folks can just look at it and go to Fairfax, Virginia's CRB website. You don't have to put it on screen right this moment. Also, folks that are listening in the public, if you have, I know Ms. Burke will probably have some comments. Please email us. Brian, can you put the PCRB email in the chat, or somebody if it's not easy for him to do? But please email us on feedback and input on how we can improve the website, make it user friendly. The other thing I was thinking is we probably want to add a Spanish component if that's possible, so that our Spanish speaking community members can also gain access and easily file a complaint and get in touch with us. That's it for me. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about the website? Okay.
Before you move forward, I just wanted to clarify on that last vote. It sounded like you said present, Mr. Mendez. I just want to make sure I get your official vote.
That is correct.
Okay. So you're voting now.
I guess that's the same. I will vote.
No contest.
I will make it a unanimous. I don't think there. Yeah, it's a positive step. I'm just I'm just cranky.
Okay.
Am I muted? I'm unmuted. Okay. So the executive director position. We have folks that, feel like, hey, they haven't passed everything in Richmond to give the ED. I see Dorinda shaking her head. So I don't know if
No, I'm just motioning to someone to close the door.
Oh, okay. I didn't know whether my mute button was on or something.
No,
You guys
you're
can hear me.
good. You're
But so there's concern about what will happen in Richmond, and so even with a special session, it could be a while, right, before there's anything concrete that changes that impacts CRBs. I don't know how quickly that when they pass a law, like, does anybody know how long all that takes? Whole process.
Well, I think last month we heard that if they act in August, then it's usually 6 months to a year before the effective date of legislation.
Okay.
So, you would be waiting a while. Let me just say something about the executive director job description, and that is that it's pretty general. And it does not, it lays out duties in a way that any functioning CRB functions that any functioning CRB would have. And if we let this slide, we really will be behind in terms of our schedule to get this board up and running. And so I think it's a high priority that we vote to submit our executive director job description to the city manager for review.
I do have a question. Even though this is kind of a, may I ask my question?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Go
thank
for it.
you. I don't, when you said it was a general or not a generic, but a general type of description that I think the second draft that you have, was it based on looking at the ordinance as it exists now with regards to what the executive director can and cannot do, or did you look at the one that came out of the initial, the ordinance that came out of the initial PCRB and compared and contrasted? Did you meld the two, or like where was that starting framework or point of origin? I was just
Well,
curious.
I'll actually tell you where the starting point of reference was, and that was the executive description, the description that was put together by the Human Resources Department of the City of Charlottesville. And I am assuming that they felt very comfortable with the legal status of that job description. What's now new in the job description is a description of what Charlottesville is, something that makes clear that this is a new board and that the executive director will be in charge of getting it up and running rather than just coming to a situation that's already established. The substantive changes involve changes to the wording that makes the duties of the executive director to first fulfill the mission of the CRB and under reporting to the city manager, rather than under the direction of the city manager, providing support to the CRB. So it makes the executive director a little bit more independent and gives them, in my opinion, a little bit more initiative without getting into Dillon rule issues. We're not saying that the guy is going to have, the guy gender neutral is going to have the right to issue subpoenas or do anything like that. The other areas where I departed from the city's draft was in broadening the acceptable education so that person doesn't have to have a Juris Doctor degree or a master's in public administration or criminal law. They can have some kind of related academic experience that is relevant to restorative justice and civilian oversight. And the final area where it was changed is that the experience is also broadened to include not only police oversight, but social justice, public outreach, mediation, restorative justice. And again, kind of a broader role as a leader in executing the mission of the CRB. I do not believe that there's anything in there that outright contradicts any of the provisions of either enabling statute.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I thought Nancy was going to say something.
No, I was just going to thank Bill for a good explanation.
Yeah, I mean, he's got, because as people are talking about defunding and reallocating funds and reimagining, you know, I mean, we've got in here social workers could be a candidate for the executive director, people with a conflict resolution background, restorative justice. Like you said, it's a lot more broadened than it originally was. When I think about what the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus spoke about earlier, I just don't see where things like subpoena power are going to necessarily, again, change the type of person that you're looking for in terms of advertising for this position.
I should also
And we
point
can't
out,
wait 6 months. Can't do it. Like we
I
can't.
should also point out that the city draft, in my opinion, was based on a model that came from the NACOL website. And I also read a whole bunch of these job postings on the NACOL website, and, you know, kind of conformed to that, use those as a model. So just for your information.
Well, I would say that, you know, the agenda allows for some public comment on this if we're gonna talk about it.
Good point.
I'm happy to vote on it too, but we should probably hear from the public
Good.
first.
Good point, Stuart. So, Mr. Wheeler, can you allow the folks that are waiting to give their points, if there are any? I don't know if they're all asleep by now. To make comment, please, sir.
If you're in the audience, you want to speak about the executive director position to the board, just click the raise hand icon, and we'll take 5 speakers for 3 minutes each.
I should also point out that if you haven't had time to read it, we can also take written comments on our website if you send it to our email box at policecrb@charlottesville.com. So if you haven't read it and you want to comment later, that's fine too.
Hey, one correction. policecrb@charlottesville.gov.
Gov, yes, Gov, you're right. You're right, Gov.
But I'll
Okay.
tell you, man, you stepped up though, because I'm not hearing that electronic sound during this meeting. So you
Okay,
you got the IT thing figured out this time.
okay, almost.
Okay, Mr. Wheeler.
We have Walt Heineke. Walt, you're on with the CRB. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. First, I just wanted to say, well, are you going to have public comment at the end as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'll hold off on that. I was just going to say really briefly that, you know, you can criticize the city for a lot of things, but the way that they have appointed you and having you particular people on the board is a really good thing. I can see tonight that you're standing on principle, and I really appreciate that. So I think they did the right thing by putting you on the board, all of you on the board, because you're doing your job, and I really appreciate that. On the ED position, I'll just say 2 things. I think the city council has asked you to wait until the General Assembly has made a decision. I don't think it's out of bounds to ask them to wait for you to finalize the ED position until that period of time as well. Secondly, I just want to make sure that you all have really carefully looked at the difference between the original ordinance and the one that you're operating under now, and are absolutely sure and positive and feel confident that that wouldn't affect the definition of the ED position as you know, as currently understood. So my advice is to create an ED position that basically operates out of the frame of the original ordinance and bylaws, with the understanding and the hope that eventually you are going to get to the point where we can either revert back to the original bylaws, or the General Assembly actually opens it up and makes it much stronger than even those original bylaws. So I would think about that PD for the ED being the most expansive you can get that pertains to the original bylaws. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walt.
Mr. Watson, our next speaker is Sarah Burke. Sarah, you're on with the CRB and you've got 3 minutes.
Thanks. I just want to point out some of those differences that Walt mentioned. So in the initial CRB's proposal and ordinance, there was a lot of power in the board, which we consider, the community and the people. And the city's version that you all are now operating under has pretty extraordinary authority and power given to one city employee. And I appreciate the efforts to try to put some of that power back in the board in the job description, but that's not where the power lies. The power lies in the ordinance. So maybe you're hoping to find the right person, but I just want to sort of explain some of the ways that the executive director is sort of walled off from the public and the board itself in a way that I think is possibly going to really undermine trust. So first of all, any conferencing under the current ordinance that happens about issues that you all raise happens under the ordinance between the chief of police or city manager and the executive director. You all are excluded entirely from any conferencing from that, unless I suppose somebody, actually some conferences expressly exclude you and some are a little bit less clear. The executive director alone is the one to make major decisions about the future of oversight, including whether an auditor is going to be needed. And there's no indication in the ordinance or in any other language that the board should be consulted on that position. They're supposed to make this decision 60 days after they start, which is not a lot of time to make informed decisions about what's needed in oversight, as you all have learned with your shortened timeframes. It's hard to get a lot done in 60 days. So currently, within 60 days of hire, the executive director is supposed to determine how much money to appropriate to civilian oversight, whether an auditor should exist, whether that person should be hired or contracted, which operations should be audited of the CPD, whether there should be an MOU at all between the executive director and the CPD, and what the content of that MOU is. So you're putting an extraordinary amount of faith in one person who's going to be hired by Dr. Richardson. This is supposed to be a community-based effort, that civilian oversight is to be led by the people. And I sure hope you get great applicants, and I hope you find the right person. But I think the issue of the job description is really tied to the ordinance, because so much of the power, and I'll note, none of this is like, these weren't the things they're saying might have been illegal about the board's original ordinance, right? These are sort of political issues. So giving so much authority to the person who is the employee, my time's up. I'm gonna respect that.
Can I just make a very short response?
Thank you, Sarah.
Can I, or should I not?
Go ahead. Well, actually, we have people waiting.
Okay, go ahead.
There are no other hands raised at this
Oh, there
point.
isn't?
So if somebody wants to raise their hand, click that icon in the Zoom webinar.
Yeah, just Sarah, just so you know, a couple of things, and one of them may be a frail read. One of them is a question that I asked when I was being interviewed for the board was, gosh, all of this stuff has to happen really quick after we convene and have an executive director, and it really doesn't seem like that's reasonable. And the members of the city council who interviewed me said, oh, don't worry, that schedule is not, you're not going to be held to that schedule. Maybe I'm just being very naive, but I think there's some flexibility. Second, another frail read that is in the current job description is I put it in there subtly, and I was hoping the HR people won't see it, but it says that the board and the executive director shall participate in the evaluation of the executive director. So we have a say, if they allow it, in whether we like how they are doing their job. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
A lot of ifs there.
Well, this is all in the spirit of moving forward. Moving forward aggressively here, yeah, we may run into a brick wall, but what can I say?
Let me ask you guys, if we hired somebody, right, or went out to hire somebody and the ordinance changed, how would that produce or provide or have a different type of applicant apply for the job or get the job, regardless of whether it's the old ordinance, the new ordinance, or even better ordinance? How's that going to change who's in the applicant pool? I'm just wondering.
I think, listening to what Sarah said, for me, it's somebody who's going to support the people versus, the bureaucracy.
Exactly. Yes.
And if they're coming strictly from a lens of bureaucracy and not really engaged with changing systems that they've worked within that are inherently racist,
right,
they are not going to be of any use to us because they will keep all the power right now in their little hands. And if they're a bureaucrat, they're not going to want to give it up.
Ever.
And we are supposed to be working for the people to shed light on issues within our own local law enforcement that have not seen the light of day, or be able to use the data to look at policy changes that can affect how 21st century policing is done. And some of that's going to be addressed at the GA and some of it isn't. But that's to what I would say. I would see, somebody who's craving power, whether they, admit to it or not, from a bureaucratic viewpoint, versus someone who wants to share power and be inclusive. Like Stuart says, we need people who are impacted by what's been going on in this city for, 200-300 years or longer. And we're not going to get that with the bureaucrat.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee that the old bylaws are really that strong. They're stronger than what we have, but they're not great. And even those are absent of subpoena power. So we're basing a lot of this on the old bylaws being ideal, right? And again, they are better than what we have, but they could change. They could, over time, we could find flaws with even those. They've never even been acted out. So I'm just thinking about the body of an applicant. They're going to have so much work experience. That person I would think would care about issues and police misconduct in order to apply for that kind of job, right?
Yeah,
you would think. You would think.
Right. But we get to interview. We get to weigh in on who that person is.
We certainly
isn't that what the bylaws say?
The city council approves. I mean, we can weigh in, but the city council is going to be the one to hire.
It's two of us. Two of us, right?
So two of us get to be a part of the interviewing process.
Right.
But that's not the job offer process.
Well, wait a minute, just if I may. The job offer is a screening tool. The purpose is to attract a bunch of people from whom we can pick candidates who don't look like they're power mad and who do have experience in civilian police oversight, racial justice, who have worked in a collaborative setting. And again, that's another one of the job requirements that I changed a little bit was an emphasis on working collaboratively with the city council, the city manager, the CRB, and community groups. So I don't think there's any problem going forward with this screening tool, in particular, because the city has not yet weighed in on whether they tolerate it or not. Let's vote it. Let's vote to send it to the HR department in the city and get the ball rolling. And if in September we can't come to an agreement, then we can back off a little bit.
Okay. Can I ask for a definition of what's "let's get the ball rolling" mean?
Oh,
does that-
look, we, and, I, again, circulated this to all of the board members, generated this draft. We have not heard word one from the city manager's office as to whether they think this is totally crazy and there's not a snowball's chance in hell that it would be approved. So we should ask formally for them to look at our draft and open negotiations or give us a reaction and then see what happens.
Well, I mean, that's my question. If they, are they going to move ahead and then put something up on their job site and that's it? We're not going to have any more, input on it? Or are we asking them to look at our draft and, like it? Or, because I'm not really clear on what we're asking the city manager to do. I feel like if we send over the job description, if we vote on it and like it and want to move it on, that we're saying this is our stamp of approval on this particular version. You have the version that you were looking at from the city human resources department. So does he now have a green light to go ahead and either use one or the other, meld both, and then just put it out there? And then
No.
Okay.
No, this is to just to try and get some reaction from them, get them moving, get them off the ball on this job description. Originally when I sort of put together a straw schedule in June, and the idea was that I thought the soonest we can possibly get this thing out the door, including public comment and negotiations with the city manager, would be the end of August. If we want to wait until September 10th, which is our next meeting, well, okay, that would be 10 days after that. So that would not be a problem. And we'd still, hopefully, within the next month, hear comments from the public on our .gov email, and hear from the HR department in the city and work something out. And who knows, we might get lucky and we might get most of what we want.
Yeah, I move to vote on submitting the draft of the executive director position to the city of Charlottesville city manager for comment and or approval.
Mr. Watson, I'm sorry to interrupt. I did want to point out we have another member of the public that has raised their hand, and we did say we'd have up to 5.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt
Whatever
you.
they have to say.
So this is Kate Fraley. Kate, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
Trying quickly to compare the initial ordinance to the city's ordinance about the 2 people on the hiring of the executive director. And I think, although I haven't been able to read them thoroughly right now, that only the initial bylaws had that representation from the PCRB, and that the city's says it's a unanimous decision by the city council. It doesn't say anything about the PCRB, at least in that one section I saw. Might say it in the bylaws or might say it in another spot, but comparing the same spots, that 2-person thing. Sarah Burke, if you're still on, you might be able to answer that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, there are no other hands raised at this point. And you're on mute.
I was having a nice little conversation with myself.
Excellent.
Yeah, but when I start answering myself back, that's when it gets bad. Okay, so I move to vote on submitting the draft that Bill took the lead on to the city manager for review and comment. and potentially approval or disapproval.
Second.
If I may interrupt, and I'm still learning the Robert's Rules of Order myself, I don't believe you can make the motion, Mr. Chair.
I'm the chair.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pay Bill off to do it for me. I'm just joking. Go ahead,
I
Bill.
move that we submit our draft of the executive director job description to the city manager for prompt review and comment.
I second that motion. We only need a second, right? So
Now we need to vote.
it looks like John Blair keeps popping up over there. It's like he wants to say something.
Mr.
Blair.
You would
Go
need
ahead.
a second and then call for discussion. If there's
No,
no.
okay, well, we kind of discussed, okay, all right. So I think we need to, I like the idea of, you know, the fact that we, you know, we've looked at the old bylaws, new bylaws. As Bill said, it's the ED position is pretty general. I fear that we can go months and months without somebody in it. There's funding right now. I don't know how much money the city of Charlottesville will have with the coronavirus to even continue to fund these positions. I just kind of think that we don't want, and I gotta relook at the bylaws. So I thought that it was carried into the next one, that we would have some ability to comment on whoever is interviewed and or potentially hired. I just think I don't know. I just think somebody that wants to do this will be a lot like us, to be honest with you. Somebody that wants to, you know, end police brutality and that type of thing is going to go for this type of job. And whether it's the old bylaws, the new bylaws, or the future reimagining bylaws we haven't thought, you're going to generally get the same type of applicants. And again, I really think it's the longer it goes vacant, it will, you know, it'll do a disservice, and it'll make us more frustrated as a board. We'll continue with frustration. We want to have anybody full time keeping this going, and we can voice our opinions. If I'm wrong, if we don't get any input, right, based on the bylaws and who they hire, we can go to city council meetings. We can give our opinion. We can always give a recommendation. All that stuff about the 60 days too, I do believe that that needs to be changed. You know, where the ED gets hired and you got 60 days to figure out what the budget's going to be, and you got to determine whether or not you need to hire an auditor. All of those things, there's a possibility for change. And city did tell us, now they have promised us other things, but regardless of whether you're with old bylaws, new bylaws, old ordinance or new ordinance, they can make some changes sort of with the job description. But you know, you can't leave it. We just can't leave it empty. We don't have anybody paid to do this, and we don't know what the Virginia Black Caucus is going to come back with, and we don't know how quickly. So you know, we can wait for them all day, but there's money there to support this position. So we need to have the you know, city look at our draft.
Can I call a question?
Yes, sir.
Max? Well,
Are we going to vote? Is that what-
Wait, I thought you had a question.
no, call the question.
Okay.
In other words, yeah. In other words, let's vote.
So we'd like to vote on submitting the draft of the executive director position for city approval or at least comment.
Okay.
Because we don't know that they're going to approve the wording exactly the way it is anyway. Even if we went back to the old ordinance right now. So they've got to have their HR people look at it. So again, we're voting again on having the city review our draft of the ED position. So Max, if you can call a vote, that'd be great.
Ms. Carpenter,
No.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
No.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Mr. Watson.
Yes. Wait a minute, we got 3 yeses. Okay. I was looking at the clock and I'm saying, okay, wait a minute. You don't, okay. Philip is non-voting member. So we might need to change that some
No.
kind of way.
And I did want to, while I realized my mic was muted before you guys took the vote, just point out that do you still have some wiggle room to amend, to look at? I mean, you've already made the vote and the vote is binding, I guess. In submitting, I would still think that you would still have wiggle room to add comment and make adjustments as necessary before it went public.
Okay, real quick, sir. So for record, then we had the majority voted to submit it forward. So we just want to get that on record. And a couple meetings ago, we've only had a couple meetings though. I think you weren't at that one though, actually.
No.
Mr. Blair said, and Mr. Richardson, there's some ability to tweak and revise, you know.
Awesome.
Even that part about you got to hire the auditor in 60 days. I don't think anybody on this board, and even though we've been up this on the city, they know that you can't hire somebody in 60 days to augment the ED. So that wording has to go. But they did say there's some flex.
Correct.
You know, so.
Answer my question. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of going back to my agenda, which is on my computer, I printed out an agenda that looks a little different than the computer. So we should be moving into another and final public comment section. Is that what you guys are seeing? No.
Other business. Yep. Section 7. Yep.
Other. Okay. Let's see. Other business. So that's. Okay. Anybody want to bring up any additional business or points, ideas?
Have we gotten a letter yet from Mr. Blair about the differences that we asked for the first meeting, you asked for on the first meeting? Has there been any movement on that?
Still have not got it. I heard you mention that on the town hall. I remember asking the second meeting, but it was probably asked as well on the first one. Or some, it's that first meeting we asked to go back to the bylaws, right? The original bylaws ordinance. Second one, I asked the mayor about the changes. And
yeah, it's been 5 weeks. No word.
Yeah. That's still a due out from the city on.
Can we give them a time limit? I mean, we've had 5 weeks. We want to do another 5 weeks, or do we want to, get an answer to our question?
I mean, we don't have any power to enforce a time limit. It would be like double secret probation.
Well, let's give them.
Take away the gold star.
I mean, as much as I would love that, they kind of, like we were talking about, do whatever they want with us whenever they want.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what it looks like.
Yep. Well, we would like something, Mr. Blair, that, I mean, Microsoft Word's got track changes in it. So, that's the very basic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've actually got the answers on our end, but we want to see, and I think that the city may have some fear because of being challenged, right, by these associations of benevolent police and all that. And so, but people need an explanation. We started in one spot, we ended up somewhere else, and there were some sessions that took place between the original board and some of the council members, but don't think there's anything written other than what we got from a nonprofit, on the city's behalf that just says, hey, we took these 7 things out because they were illegal or whatever. So we still want that. They know that we want that. We'd like to see that by the end of this month. So we got the major players listening. We got the city attorney, and we got the mayor, and so they know, they hear us.
It's part of being accountable and transparent, isn't it?
Yep. Unmasking the illusion.
There you
Yes,
go.
ma'am.
There you go.
And Mr. Chair, I know this isn't what the board was looking for, but if you reference I believe the November 4th, 2019 meeting, council meeting, council, I believe, does go through all of the changes that they make to the original bylaws kind of line for line. So again, it's not a written document, but it does give you some access to things.
Well, can we have that, Chairman, can we have that? If it's, in the minutes of the meeting, can he just take that out and make it just one specific, document to us? I mean, is that a problem?
I can look for what you're asking for and forward it to the board. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I would like to go to public comment, and I know it's getting late. It's just getting late. That's a simple fact, right?
Oh, heck, city council's had 8-hour sessions. Come on, we're just in the early part of the evening.
Oh,
No, I feel for him though. I feel for him. I think people's effectiveness begins to deteriorate after about 9 o'clock. So
52 minutes.
The board's going to take 5 speakers at this point for 3 minutes each. If you'd like to speak to the board, click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. We've got 1 hand up at the moment, and that's Walt Heineke. Walt, you're on with the PCRB. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to be really specific when you ask for Mr. Blair's response on why the original ordinance was not palatable. My speculation is that most of the things that were identified by City Council that night that Max is talking about were really more political than they were having to do anything with state statute or case law. And in fact, the People's Coalition has asked Mr. Blair specifically to cite state statute and case law that would have prevented the original bylaws and ordinance from being put into place. So I think it's really important to separate out what's the, Nancy mentioned this notion of a boogeyman about the state and lawsuits. We need to know specifically, what state statute and case law are prohibitive. And if they're not, then I think you can assume that the watering down was mostly based on political motivations that have to do with the dynamics inside City Hall and the city government. So I think it's really important to get very specific about those kinds of things, because I don't think that we have a problem. And in fact, I'll raise this issue again. If we were to revert back and we were to be sued, I think it would be a simple matter of basically going back to the bylaws that you are operating under now. So, I think that, if there was challenge, I think it would be a pretty quick, easy matter to say, okay, we stand down and we'll go back to the originals and see what we can do with the state, the General Assembly's movement between now and next January. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walt.
And our next speaker is Sarah Burke. Sarah, you're on with the board. Go ahead.
Whew. You're right, y'all. I'm so tired. I know you are too. First, I just want to ask a very specific question, which is, why are you limiting the number of public speakers and the time and area where people can speak publicly? I tried to raise my hand at the end of the ED discussion after you'd heard from two people and was told I couldn't comment twice. So it's a lot to say in 3 minutes. I'll try to do it again, I suppose. I think one of the things Walt mentioned is that, specificity with the city, in my experience, is really key. So the issue of the executive director position, you all voted to move forward with sending that. I urge you to determine, who's going to send that, how that's going to be worded, and make sure that you all agree that the language that you use to send that email is allows for the collaboration that you presume you're going to get with the city moving forward on the ED description. Similarly with, what exactly you want to know from the city attorney and city council, that's different between the two bylaws. You all have a redlined version of the differences between the original ordinance and bylaws and the current ordinance and bylaws, but that's not really what you're asking for, it sounds. And so I think really being clear and putting that in writing would be helpful, and making sure that everybody on the board agrees with, the emails before they go out is important, so that it's not just one person's role, but also not just one person's voice who ends up responding. I know that can be a really difficult position to be in. I just want to be very clear that no one on the initial CRB wanted the board or the city to get sued for anything or to do anything illegal. We did what we thought was reasonable within the confines of the state law. And speaking of state law, you've asked the question, which I don't think I have time to answer. It's in the Constitution of how long it will be for the state law to come in effect. I think the best guess, although there's some issues that could come into play, is probably more like January of 2021. But all that does is put the power back into the city's hands. And you all have expressed frustration with the way the city has handled your pretty small requests to this point compared to things like subpoena power and final disciplinary authority. The state is not going to just outright grant that power. The state is going to allow localities to grant that power to a CRB. And so the question is, do you have confidence that the city will do that? And has your experience been that the city is likely to take your recommendation on that? And if not, what does that mean and what needs to change? And how can you express that publicly so that people know what's going on? I think, we're really grateful to get to listen to these meetings once a month, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It'd be wonderful if you all could find a way to express that to us. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Watson, there are no other hands raised at this time.
Okay. Well, any final
I take it back, and just to be clear, and I'll give you the opportunity, Mr. Watson. Ms. Burke has raised her hand again.
Unmute. Okay, Sarah, one last one.
And I do want to just ask if the city attorney wants to offer any guidance.
I think Ms. Burke can speak again for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I don't intend to take 3 minutes. I know it's a late night. One question that I was wondering, if you all plan to be sending these questions like Stuart drafted to CPD. Back in 2012, the CPD chief of police at the time, Longo, started requiring officers to report narratives for each stop, looking at the decision making of the officer making that stop. And he said that they weren't keeping that record at the time. And he was shocked to hear that they weren't keeping this important constitutional record, was his testimony at the time. I'm not aware if they are still keeping narratives for, the reasons why they make a stop. But I think that would be an important question to ask. And I think it would be great if you all want to keep sending questions to CPD to better understand their policies and procedures, to solicit some public input from that, because I think people would have some really great ideas. And that's it. I don't want to take even 3 more minutes. Thank you.
Yes, please send ideas to us. It's not really, didn't mean to, this is just a starting point, but there are a lot more people out there in the community who have like personal experiences and who are just smarter than all of us and know things like that about Chief Longo from 8 years ago. So please send it to us via email or get in touch with us somehow.
Okay, great.
Mr. Watson, we have another hand up. This is Rory Stolzenberg.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks to the board. So I just wanted to quickly touch on the discussion earlier about the request for records from the city and for an explanation. While a general request may be open-ended and maybe you don't have the authority to assign a deadline for that, it seems to me, per my reading of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, that this board and certainly you all as individuals have as much authority as anyone to request records by any means, including verbally, and be assured of receiving them, any responsive records from the city in a 5-day timeline with a 7-day extension. Now, it might be preferable for you and for the city to give more of a verbal explanation or an explanation rather than a written record or responsive document. But you do at least have that authority if they continue to ignore you. It seems to me that it's reasonable to construe any of these requests that you've made in that regard. And separately, I'd like to draw your attention, somewhat similar to the ED discussion earlier, to the newly reposted Fourth Amendment analyst position, which I know isn't the one that you requested exactly. And I think it's reasonable on the part of the city to expect, some good faith from you all in expecting that they'd fill that to the best of the abilities as they specified. But the requirements and parameters of that position, to me, raise some serious questions. The requirements are either for a JD or for a police officer experience in a supervisory role for 5 years at least. And to me, the salary range that's specified, the top end, I think, is in the 80,000s. For a lawyer, almost would seem to preclude any of them from doing it. And maybe to the point earlier, they'd be more likely to do it because it's a good cause. But that seems a little bit less true for this role, which is under CPD and not under the CRB, than for the actual ED position. And if not a lawyer, then it needs to be a police officer with 5 years of experience in a supervisory role. But also either of those positions need to be data analysts. So I'm a little bit skeptical of those parameters. And I think it raises some questions. And I think those questions are doubled by the fact that that position has now been open for 18 months. So I think maybe, even though that's not exactly under your purview, it is something that you might want to consider and pay attention to. And thank you and have a great night.
Thank you.
And Mr. Watson, at this time, there are no other hands raised.
All right, everybody. I think this was our best meeting so far. We're gaining some steam. Keep your heads up. I think we have a road ahead of us, but I learn a lot from this group. We're diverse. We got different ideas. I think we're working together pretty well. I wish we can go into a room, work on the things we need to do during the week. The email component's a little bit challenging, but nevertheless, I'm glad to work with all you guys, and great having a Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. And I think we got our message out right to the public about how we feel, about our frustration. And I think if we stick together, we can make some changes, right? We can make some changes. There were some great things said by Nancy at the listening session that we weren't invited to. Great information by Stuart, and Dorinda always comes with it. We know that. Philip, we got some info out of you. And I want you to feel, you know, like you're part of the board. You know, I know you don't have a vote, but you've been here a long time. You're here because you want to be here, right? You want to see change. And so we're not going to ignore anything you say just because you're not a voting member, just because you are a former police officer, you know? So you're just as important as everybody else on this board. Bill, I thank you for your, you know, really moving forward with that ED and all the time you spent. And just look forward to continuing to work with you guys. And with all that being said, I'm calling this meeting to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned. Yep.
Good night,
All
everybody.
right, thank you.
Good night, be safe.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.